and put your hand up. And other than that, we'll carry on as normal. So agenda item 1, apologies for absence and substitute. Please.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hannah.
We've had apologies from councillors Barrett, Mulligan, Myers and Heseltine, and we've got substitutes which are councillors Soloway, Shuttleworth and Hanley. And that's it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need to do a roll call?
Yes, please.
Over to you then, Hannah.
Starting with yourself, I'll take you off. Councillor Wrighton.
Present.
Thank you.
I'm struggling to unmute for some reason.
That's all right. Councillor Liss.
Yes, here.
Councillor Mabley.
Here.
Councillor Metcalfe. Councillor Morell.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Noland.
Present.
Councillor Place.
Here.
Councillor Rose.
Present.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
Present.
Councillor Soloway.
Here.
Councillor Welsh.
Present. Can't see a thing. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Here.
Great. And Councillor Hanley.
Present.
Thank you. That's it, Chairman.
Confirmation of minutes. Are we all happy with the minutes? I'm looking around for any hands shooting up anywhere. Seeing some nods. So with that, we can probably move on. Public participation. I don't believe we've got anybody. So moving on to item 4, declarations of interest. Again, looking around for hands shooting up, thinking what we're doing tonight. Shouldn't be too many people willing to stick their hands up. No, I can't see anybody on the screen. So moving rapidly on to item number 5. We don't have Patrick here, so be gentle with me because I'm going to try and go through the finance. We've got the I can see Councillor Wheeler and Maidley laughing hysterically. So we've got the outturn report for the year 1920. At the end of the day, it shows a net surplus of 341,000, which only, but that only includes 2k from the savings plan. There's various variances. I know Councillor Wheeler's asked quite a few questions about the variances, but I think sort of the headlines from it are that we probably had about 80k of in-service savings, normally as usual down to staffing, but there was varying reasons within there, which I think are quite detailed in the report. And then we also had about 200 and some k, which was down to interest and getting a better interest rate, and also the MRP, you know, where we changed sort of how we did our finances and sorting pensions and things like that out. So that gave us a good saving, even though it won't be quite as good next year. It is a year on year for the next 4 or 5 years. With that, I'll move the recommendation and I will open it up to questions of Richard, probably not me. So over to members. There's no hands up as yet. Councillor Wheeler. Over to you, Councillor Wheeler.
So can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry. I'm enjoying the pleasures of split screen meetings. What I won't do is obviously bore members with all the questions I've asked because they've been answered and I'm happy. There's some answers I got that raise additional questions which I'd like to bring up now, which is looking through, I think, Appendix 1. There was a question I asked about the overspend on enterprise in Craven, and I was told that just under 171,000 overspend was for local plan and development control. and I had a very, very detailed answer about that, which was great. Although in some of the narrative, it did talk about the costs that were associated with the local plan have now been sorted, and our costs will now be returned to, and the phrase was used, expected level, which is great. And the question I raise about that is, can we expect to hear any recommendations from the select committee, and will they have any kind of impact on costings for the future? Bearing in mind, we talked about expected level of costs for the future. There was also talk about a growth bid, and I wondered what the value of that growth bid was for 2021. And then it's fairly hot off the press, I appreciate that, but have we looked, or will we intend to factor in any potential additional costs as a result of the new planning white paper? That's my first question. There's several. Do you want one at a time, or shall I chuck them all at you?
Go answer that one, I think, Richard, please.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. So just in terms of the response around the local plan, I think the response was really sort of getting at that the cyclical nature of a local plan means that when it's time to produce it, there's an increasing cost in doing that, and the reference to moving, I suppose, back to more normal or expected levels of expenditure was to take account of the additional costs associated with the delivery of the plan. We do have a planning reserve, and there was the option to address some of the exceptional costs from that reserve in 1920, but we've managed to contain them within the envelope of the revenue budget for last year, which does mean that, you know, there's that additional flexibility to use that reserve potentially in the current year as one of the mechanisms to help us through the difficulties we're facing as a result of COVID. In response to the growth bid for 2021, the bid that was approved was for 42,000, which was to provide additional staffing resource within planning. But at the time that was approved, at the time the budget was approved, it wasn't specific about precisely what post or role that would be, but there was recognition of a requirement for some additional resource. And just to be clear, that was a separate item from the recommendations from the select committee. In terms of the white paper, sorry, that was the third part of the question?
Yeah.
I think it's probably too early to say exactly what the resource requirements around that would be, and we'd have to understand fully what it would be. But you know, if it does present additional staffing resources or requirements for such, then we'd have to consider it in the round as part of our normal budgeting process. But I think my response, unless others have got more detail around it, it's potentially a bit early to say exactly what the demands might be at this stage. Thank you.
Do you want to come in on that, Paul?
Yeah, just very briefly, the whole idea that the government have put forward on planning, whether you agree with it or not, is to simplify the whole planning process from the local plan through to local decision making as well. There is quite a lot about local planning in there, so still scant on detail, but they're looking at simplifying, not over complicating even the zoning proposals for the new local plan, which have to be implemented 42 months after the legislation is passed. Should in theory be simpler, but as I say, devil is always in the detail. I think we're quite a long way off the legislation yet. It is a consultation, it is out, and I'm sure this authority will be making a response along with District Councils Network, and there are some fundamental issues in there on the planning white paper which really do need to be addressed, which could impact on, you know, Craven quite badly.
Paul Ellis?
Yeah, just to add a specific detail to Richard's response on the select review of planning enforcement, we still do need to deal with those recommendations. So there may be pressure on the revenue budget in planning as a consequence of that. We're looking to bring a report on that September, October.
Next question, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, again, pleasing that vacancies are being filled because they were highlighted again in the questions I asked, which I know was an issue last quarter that we were struggling, but we seem to be getting on top of it, which is good news. In waste management services, there was an issue about overtime. There was an overspend on overtime. And I've been told that you only allow about 2,000 for overtime. And I guess if overtime is a regular occurrence, then maybe the budget for overtime should be more realistic. So we don't have an overspend. We actually have a realistic figure for overtime, because it seems over the years that I've been on this committee, there is always overtime in waste management. So bite the bullet, put a realistic budget on it. Comment on that?
I'll just respond around the financial side of it. Again, in setting the 2021 budget, there was recognition of additional resource requirements around waste, and the budget included 79,000 as an additional pressure, and part of that was to fund additional staffing resource to try to reduce the pressure on agency staff usage, for one thing, but also to give the opportunity to try to review the staffing complements and the way that's delivered. And certainly from initial monitoring of the in-year position, if you exclude the impact of having to respond to COVID, it would appear that there has been progress in addressing those underlying pressures which were evident in previous years, both around the staffing element, and as we've noted in the report, there were pressures around the costs of vehicle hire, which have been addressed in the current year as well. So it's going to be clouded in terms of this year's picture because of the additional costs of safe collection that we've had to implement, but certainly on a straight comparison to last year, the initial figures, and we'll confirm this when we get to Q1 in September, would suggest there's been progress in doing so this year.
Comment on that, Carl? Muted, Carl.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman. Things were going quite well, actually, Councillor Wheeler, until COVID came along, and I think I said at Council do the night that it's entirely to the credit that they were prepared to go over and above what would be considered the norm to keep up with the services. I think it would be probably questionable, both in HR terms and indeed in terms of our dealings with our unions, if we were to put a large amount in the overtime line of the budget. I think it would be frowned upon. There's a normal expectation that when you set a budget, the figures that you put in there don't include massive amounts of extra work outside the normal working day you're expecting your staff to work. So a bit of an awkward one. Richard's quite right. I think we were progressing quite well this year until COVID came along. So it's going to be interesting to see what the first and second quarter of this year produces.
Thank you. And finally, on Appendix B, the income and savings, it's one. It's in the light of cost pressures, obviously due to COVID-19. Are we going to be reappraising all of our projected green and amber savings targets for 2021 through to 22-23?
Yes, is the short answer. The events of the last few months will mean that the medium-term financial plan, which we'd refresh and update anyway as part of the budget setting, but will need to be potentially more fundamentally reviewed to take account, certainly in Craven's case, not necessarily the additional cost pressures, but the impact on our revenue streams, on our income streams. And so we'll be doing that in the autumn. But there's the other key element which affects us, which will be, we assume, happening in the autumn, which is the government spending review. and that will give us hopefully some clarity over what the funding picture looks like for the next 2 or 3 years. Now, the outcome of that might mean that some of the assumptions that we've made previously will need to differ from the plan that we submitted in February. You know, and we're working through a range of different scenarios and options around that. But until we get the clarity around the spending review and any announcements around local government funding, you know, it's going to be difficult to come up with a meaningful medium-term financial plan. The cost pressures in year at the moment seem to be containable within the additional grant support that the government have provided. And with the support around income losses, that does helpfully mitigate the impact on the council in year. But it's correct that the savings plan as was submitted for the current year did include around 188,000 of savings that are potentially affected, you know, because of the income streams that they relate to. And they are potentially at risk in the current year. And again, we're making reference to those in the returns that we make to government each month.
As a final question, on Appendix E in the earmarked reserves, thank you for giving me a list of the earmarked reserves. There is 180,000 earmarked reserves that we approved for the start of the Tour de Yorkshire 2020. And obviously that hasn't happened. So is this going to go back into the general reserve, or are we going to have to vote again on whether we roll it over to 2021?
Well, I think I would need to check, but I think if it's been earmarked for a specific purpose, and if that purpose has been deferred, then it could potentially happen in the future year, and the funding's been set aside for it. Perhaps need to check with you on the absolutes of whether it requires a further decision or not. But it's certainly been set aside for that purpose, and if the event is to happen but at a later date, then we might just need to review the decision making around it. But as part of our wider response to what's happening at the moment, all of our earmarked reserves are being reviewed by myself, really to look at what scope there might be to reprioritise some of the values in there if we need to, as part of our response to what's happening this year. But again, that'll be reported formally at a later date.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. It's just that obviously with that Tour de Yorkshire start, it specifically says 2020. So in light of what's happened, and in light of how we're going to juggle our finances to deal with what's coming, maybe members that voted for it might have a different view on it now, and possibly that could be one that could be debated again.
We'll see where it is, Mark, and if we need to bring it back, we'll bring it back. We don't even know if it's going to be a Tour de Yorkshire next year, do we, at the moment? So,
no.
so we'll work through that, and we don't know what their plans are either, to be right honest. It's if they want to go, they had organised 3 years set to starts and finishes, so whether they want to delay them all or whatever. So leave it with us, and we will bring it back if we think we need to, and we probably will need to.
Okay, thank you. That's me.
Peter, Councillor Madeley.
Yeah, it just comes back to the waste again, the overtime. I agree with Carl that if you set up overtime, it's normally on this sort of function, because it's live function, it's a difficult one to set the overtime. But my real consideration is for the agency staff, because we pay a premium for the agency staff, and we have been paying that for many years now. The answer is how many agency staff we have, and could we reduce the amount on agency to get our own staff at a better rate, so we wouldn't have to have so much overtime?
We've definitely employed at least 2 more staff, I'm thinking, just recently. full-time within the waste team. It's always one of those that we don't need all the staff all the time, and sometimes agency are better than full-time, but Paul Ellis is going to come in and correct me
Good.
completely.
Thank you.
No need to correct you, just to say that that was the purpose of the growth bid into this year's revenue budget. It was to get a replacement number of staff for the agency budget, so we can actually reduce that agency budget to a negligible amount. There'll still be a need for a small amount of agency budget to cover sickness, long-term sickness and annual leave, but nonetheless, we're now recruited fully to all the posts. Just on the overtime, just on the overtime, just a bit more on that. It should return back down to the normal level of around £2,000. It was just in this last year with the absences that we needed to use some of the staff for overtime, and there was a specific issue around weekend working, weekend street cleansing that we've now addressed, and we've got somebody permanently into that post.
Yeah, it's the point, if I can just come back on that, has there been a steady reduction in agency staff over the years? So we're not paying that premium. This is for like emergencies, long-term sickness, etc. You know, so like COVID, you have to have more people in on the Saturday. So is the agency staff reducing, or is it remaining the same or increasing?
It's reducing, Peter. We are deliberately recruiting to posts as best we can.
Good, excellent. That is what we should hear. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. No, we'd rather have full-time Craven District
Yes.
Council staff.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm looking around. I don't have any more hands up on this. I've moved it, but Councillor Rose, and then.
Thank you, Chair. I may have missed this, but I don't know. Anyway, pages 10 and 11, as far as I could read it, it looked as though there was an overspend on shared ownership and also on Airview House and homeless issues. The shared ownership, what's happening there to with respect to that aspect of finance? Thank you.
I'm probably going to go to Paul Ellis or Richard. Are you coming in on that one, Richard?
Well, I'll just mention quickly on the shared ownership. The reason it's a deficit is because the income level received was less than the budgeted income level. So shared ownership isn't a cost for us. It's just that the income that we budgeted to receive from shared ownership in 1920 was less than we'd originally estimated, because the number of units that came on stream were less. Unless Paul's got anything further to add on that, I think that's broadly the picture.
I think the other thing on that was that we've actually given bigger shares away. So ours
yes, that's part of it as well.
50% share, and in actual fact, quite a lot of people have bought nearer to the like the 25%, or even some have completely bought out, I believe now. But Paul, over to you.
Yeah, there's also some unbudgeted legal and valuation fees in that overspend on the shared ownership that we will have put right for this year's budget.
What about Airview House, page 11, on the spends? That also, pardon me, had an overspend. Is that with respect to upgrading it, or how did that happen? Thank you.
I'm unsure on Airview House. Richard, do you know?
I mean, there is an additional maintenance cost included this year of 10,000, and some of the overspend relates to income for rents not being as at the budgeted level for the year, but a big chunk of that is 10,000 to do with additional maintenance cost on the building this year.
Okay. I mean, I'm very pleased that we have that facility. It was just a little inquiry, if you like. And can I finally ask, on page 13, about the community safety hub and customer services, do I read it that somebody's been made redundant, or a post has disappeared. I may well have read that incorrectly. All to do with the, as I said, the Community Safety Hub.
Whoever wants to take that one, Paul Trevlin, do you want to take that?
Customer services, that's where the focus was. We looked at the staffing levels within there, and we used opportunity also when staff have left the organisation. So it's a combination of staff leaving by one means or another, which is actually means we're producing just the same service level, actually better, but that's more down to the reduced demands in the last few months that we had under the old staffing regime as well. So it's been a very worthwhile look at the staffing levels within that service.
Thank you. I'm just conscious. Well, I was very aware of how effective and well, how excellent the customer services was throughout COVID lockdown. And despite people obviously working from home or under very different conditions, it was still a very high, a good quality service. And I was pleased to see that. I was just conscious we can't afford to upset that, but thank you. That's put my mind at rest.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. We've looked like we were operational all the way through, which has been really good, and the public have appreciated it. Looking round, nobody else appears to be flagging. I'm short of a seconder at the moment, I believe. Councillor Maidel is waived, but thank you very much, Peter. Do we need to take a vote? Looking round.
Yes, please.
Okay. If you'd like to run us through then, Hannah, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So starting with yourself, Councillor Foster.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wrighton.
For.
Councillor Liss.
For.
Councillor Maidley.
For.
Councillor Morell.
For.
Councillor Noland.
For.
Councillor Place.
For.
Councillor Rose.
For.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
For.
Councillor Soloway.
For.
Councillor Welsh.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
And Councillor Hanley.
For.
Thank you, Chairman, that's all.
You guys, that appeared to be unanimous. Moving on, agenda item 6. This is the capital programme to the end of the financial year 2019-20. It gives a revised programme of 8.692 million, not 8,000. And the reasons for those changes are written in paragraphs 3.1 to 3.6, with an actual spend of £3.593 million. Obviously, there's also a slippage request, as usual. I mean, this one looks particularly horrendous at £5 million, but there are some clear reasons that are also written out in Appendix B of the report. A lot of it's down to shared ownership and Skipton, sorry, not shared ownership, the joint venture and Skipton Town Hall. Appendix item 8 gives a commentary on each of the programmes. The outturn slippage value for each project is also given. Yep, we've got some big projects waiting to go that we'd love to have got done last financial year, but for various reasons, they ain't quite got done, be it underpinning of Town Hall right the way through to gas pipes, planning permissions, etc., with Engine Shed Lane. These are all big projects we need to get done, and the money's there, and most of it, hopefully that £5 million slippage will be far, far smaller at the end of this year, because if it isn't, then we will be missing out on grant funding. So it's not a fingers crossed. It's a will be a lot less than the £5 million this year. The recommendations are at 2, so I'll move those and hand it over to members to quiz either me or Richard or whoever on it. Thank you. Do you want to come in, Richard, and just say something before I go to members?
Only briefly, Councillor, just to say, as emphasise really the point you made, it does seem a significant amount of slippage to carry forward. but around, I think it's just over 70% of that relates to two elements, to two projects, as you've said. So, you know, because they form such a significant part of the plan, they have a big impact if they're delayed. But as you've said, the detail around the other projects and the reasons for carry forward are there in the report, and happy to take questions if there are. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Wheeler, sorry, with his hand up.
Thank you, Richard. Again, there's one question which I have to say, I did ask this question at the third quarter policy meeting where we looked at capital spending. Obviously, we were into COVID again there, and the question I raised was to say, with the slippage, and I appreciate a big bulk of that slippage is projects that will get built. Are there any in there that we can look at whereby we're going to defer significantly or even jettison due to financial circumstances? And the answer I got back was there is going to be a full and complete appraisal of all capital projects by all the project leaders or holders. I asked this question again, and I've been given the same answer, that there's this full comprehensive review. And I'm just wondering, when do we get the results of this full and comprehensive review? It's been going for quite some time now.
Shall I respond, Councillor?
I'm sort of guessing that it'll be when we've done the review and when we actually know where we are. But I'll hand back to Richard to give the correct version.
No, that's kind of where we are really. The review of the capital programme was really instigated in May, when we were in a quite significant period of uncertainty. So pre-government announcements around support for lost income, for example. And it seemed prudent at that point to review the capital plan, to ask that very question that you've raised, really, that is there anything in there that if we need to, that we can defer to a future date or cancel altogether. And so we asked all of the project managers to assess their project, where it's up to, what's the position with their funders, if there are additional external funders, additional risks posed by COVID. And we're sort of making that assessment as part of the Q1 outturn report that we'll review, that we'll report in September. But certainly the initial findings from that, and because of the way that support has been confirmed since then, there are some projects that have slipped because of COVID, and others have slipped for other reasons, which will be reported when we bring the report to you. But it doesn't suggest at this stage that any need to be deferred or dropped because the funding isn't there. But you know, we'll go through that more fully when we bring the Q1 position to you. What the review did highlight that needs to be done and is being done, and some of them are working their way through to the committee, are particularly around the commercial investment projects, where we need to ensure that the assumptions that we built into our previous thinking in business cases is still valid and still applies post COVID, really. And that was one of the actions that, you know, we need to do that reassessment and give ourselves the assurance that what we thought was the case a few months ago is still the case. And some of those will need to come back for additional approval. Okay.
I think you may just need to unmute yourself, Councillor Foster.
I think me and you are fighting over the mute button, guy. Councillor Shuttleworth, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's a question for Mr. Ellis, actually, and quite by coincidence, I did email him 2 or 3 days ago about this very subject, about unforeseen expenditure for the town hall. I wonder if he'd like to make a verbal reply to my query, if possible. If not, I'd like him to reply by email as soon as possible, because I think that there's been a great deal, or certainly in financial terms, of additional expenditure for the town hall, which has only arisen because of the lack of adequate investigation prior to a contract being let. Would Mr. Ellis just make a comment, please?
Yeah, Paul, if you want to.
Yeah, happy to do both. Happy to respond now, and also I'll drop Councillor Shuttleworth an email with a bit more detail. The additional capital requirement for the town hall relates to this year, so it's not related to last year's capital programme. But I think the two specific areas that you were asking around was the roof and the works that were required on the roof. We did carry out a survey of the roof probably 2 or 3 years ago now, probably maybe even 4 years ago, and that did indicate that we would need to do some works on the roof of the council chamber, and it was always intended that we'd align that work with the HLF project and the construction of the museum. So it's gone into that contract. So that isn't a directly related unforeseen expenditure that's included within the additional budget request that went last week. The one item that is unforeseen was the additional work that was required to the ceiling. And since we did have the survey again a couple of years back, there's been more of a deterioration of the decorative plasterwork on the ceiling than what was reported at the time, and that increased the scope of works. So as I say, I'm quite happy to put a more detailed response in writing. I'm quite happy to share the initial survey reports with Councillor Shuttleworth.
All right, Councillor Shuttleworth, you're nodding. So, Councillor Welsh.
Fine, Chairman, thank you.
Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed that I don't think you'd had your recommendation seconded. If you haven't, I will second it. Very pleased to see with the Langcliffe Quarry development. Hopefully going ahead. It isn't in my ward, but just up the road, and very much appreciate it. But if I could just make a comment at the same time. We are 2 items into the agenda, and could I possibly make a comment that when there are things with overriding public concern, social media screaming left, right and centre, and everything else, and these are ideal things to bring to this committee. But bearing in mind, many times we do get individual members with individuals questions and complaints. Would it be possible for them to contact the officers beforehand, if it's just for their own personal benefit or one thing or another, and then they can get the answers, and then it doesn't hold up the rest of the meeting. All I'm trying to say is that for the interests of getting business done, a lot of the questions that have been asked, members could put it individually to the officers before the meeting, and then it wouldn't drag it out. Unless it's just me that's looking at it from the wrong point of view, I would just like to make that comment, Chairman. Thank you.
To be fair to certainly with Councillor Wheeler, he has put an extensive list of questions for tonight to the officers already, and these are really subsequent follow-ups from those questions. So I will indulge him, if you know what I mean, tonight, because he's already put in, like I said, a lot of work, a lot of time into reading the reports, putting those questions forward, and the questions that are being asked are still pertinent to what we're discussing, to make sure that I think members of the public seeing proper check and balance of what we're doing, and not just nodding everything through on a wink is probably the wrong way as well, Councillor Welsh. So somewhere in between. Hopefully we won't be too long on the few items left, but because I realise it's a warm evening. On that
If I
note,
could come back, Chairman, could we have a list of how many members of the public actually listen to policy committee? Thank you.
I'm sure that can be arranged. It's surprising actually how many people are tuning in now that democracy is available without having to turn up at the Craven District Council offices on a Tuesday night at 6:30. So, on that note, I've had it moved and seconded. I'm guessing we're off to the vote again. We really still do need to sort the system out and be able to press a button. But anyway, over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Chairman. So again, Councillor Foster,
For,
Councillor Wrighton,
Or,
Councillor Liss,
For,
Councillor Maidley,
Or,
Councillor Morell,
or,
Councillor Noland,
For,
Councillor Place,
For,
Councillor Rose,
For,
Councillor Shuttleworth,
For,
Councillor Soloway,
For,
Councillor Welsh,
For,
Councillor Wheeler,
Or,
and Councillor Hanley.
For,
So again, we're unanimous, and that's it, Chairman. Thank you.
you, Hannah. I believe the next agenda item is agenda item 7, performance monitoring. Members are recommended to note, so the recommendations are to note. Over to Richard if he wants to just go through it briefly. That's all right.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just very briefly, I won't reiterate everything in the report, but just to remind that this is the position to the end of March 2020, and so the impact of COVID-19 is largely not reflected in the performance measures. It does affect some, but it mostly doesn't affect the measures. And because of that and the way we've been working for the few months, it has been a bit more difficult than usual to obtain all of the detailed updates that we would normally. And we've had a member of staff who deals with this usually retire in June. So it's been more difficult than usual to pull the information together, but we have managed to do that. But equally, because of the changes in the service, it does provide an opportunity for us to review how we're doing this and what we're reporting. And so when we bring you the Q1 report for the current financial year, we are looking to make some enhancements and changes to it. And to sort of improve the way that we're reporting our performance to you throughout the year. But just in terms of the council plan, so at the end of March, all of the council plan actions monitored were either on track or delayed, but with a plan for completion, and none of the actions are stalled. Like I said, some of the measures haven't been updated as recently as we'd like to. But you can see through the report the performance against the sort of red, amber, green position. In terms of council plan actions, waste management and affordable home measures have improved, but still remain below the targets that we'd set. But the net number of new additional homes provided are substantially above target for 1920. Just a couple of points on the service performance side, some encouraging news. A range of service performance measures for Revs and Bens and for planning and building control have been reported to committee during 1920 to ensure oversight of the performance of these services because they've experienced various challenges in the past. And so it is quite pleasing to see there's been significant improvement in a range of indicators across these two areas, which is appended at the end of the report. So I think, Chair, on that point, I'll finish. The information's there for people to see, and happy to take questions.
Councillor Rose.
thank you. I do appreciate I may be asking questions that, or making comments that are visible straight away. Anyway, I am pleased to see that the number of affordables has improved. It would be really good to actually see 69 over 69 to get more built and available rather than 51 over 69. I just wonder if there is a time when that might be achieved. And a second small question about the recycling issue with respect to and how can we ensure that none of the recyclables are contaminated by, sorry, material in a recyclable bin isn't contaminated by a non-recyclable. I seem to think, I may have got this wrong, that this causes an issue at the end of the process, so to speak, and whether we need to be a bit clearer about what to do if you're not sure about something being recyclable. I don't know whether that's a question for now, however I've made it. But yes, the affordables, when do we think we might get them all up and running, so to speak? Thank you.
We've got quite a lot more on the ground for this year, Councillor Rose, so hopefully we will make 69 this year. If the planning white paper comes in, it makes it a bit more difficult because only sites over 50 houses are going to be require on-site provision, and then it's by negotiation, and some can just be the cheap ones to buy, so to speak. You know, first-time buyer ones. Everything else is going to be off-site provision. So how we're going to deliver off-site provision using, in theory, the infrastructure levy will give us that opportunity, but we've then got to find land in order to put the affordable houses. So it ain't going to make it any easier. It doesn't appear to be at the moment. We'll obviously be responding in kind to the white paper and the questions and answers, and I'm guessing they'll get pretty much across the board of the council that we could do with having more control over that. As far as the waste one, probably I'll go to Carl for that because he's got his hand up rather than me answer it badly.
Yeah, just basically, Councillor Rose, to remind you that we did carry out quite an extensive publicity action plan with all of the public, which included stickers to go around onto bins to try and help the public out. There's still more we can do. I mean, I still find from time to time, certainly on the polythene containers that food comes in, you've got to look closely to see which ones you can and which you can't recycle. But we are working towards getting there. I think the bigger issue that we have had this year with recycling, and Mr. Ellis might want to say something on this, has been possibly the Performance Development Park, which hasn't quite come up to expectations for one reason and another. But I think our performance is pretty good, but we can always do things to improve.
Thank you. I do appreciate that, and I know a lot has much has been improved. It's just as you quite rightly pointed out, it's those small items every so often that crop up, and you think, can I or can I not recycle it? And if it's messing up the whole process, that's a bit of a shame. But no, I think we have an excellent system, and like it's just got better and better. Just that one little bit. Thank you very much.
And just on that, Councillor Rose, we were going to do an educational programme around schools, but obviously coronavirus came, schools got closed, and we'd also a few more things in the pipeline that's just taken, unfortunately, a bit to the back burner while we've got through this. But as soon as we get we look like we've got a bit of clear water ahead, we'll endeavour to get those programmes back up and running, because it seems to be the best way to educate the parents is to educate the children. So still see it now, black plastic bags going into the recycling bin with the recycler in it. It's a really annoying one that could so simply be, altered to be more successful. I've Councillors Wheeler and then Councillor Holloway.
Oh God. Hello, sorry, bear with me, I'm still trying to work with the split screen. Thank you. Okay, in deference to Councillor Welch, let's whiz through these. So housing, yeah, I had the answers to that, thank you. Leave Liverpool Canal towpath, asked about whether work had been completed, and I'm pleased to say it got completed on 26th of June. So all those people can get out there and enjoy it. That's good news. Environmental, where are we? Recycling, yes. Sorry, Carl. Rather than ask a question that's going to elicit information, I'll make a cheap political point instead. I've been advised that the reasons for the performance against the indicators, which is more residual waste, less recycling, is a combination of high contamination rates and apparently, as you alluded to, Allerton Park being I think the phrase is more sensitive than they were to the previous arrangement. So bearing that in mind, we spent just under 329,000 on recycling last year, and we still can't get as close to the KPIs as we want to. We're falling short. So what can we do to get closer, or do we just admit our shortcomings and set lower achievable targets?
It was aimed at you, Carl. I'll let you answer.
Yeah, the last thing we'll be doing is setting lower targets, even if they don't appear to be achievable. We shall keep aspiring to make them achievable. As I said earlier, we had quite a major public awareness purge, but there still will be people who don't quite act as they should in this. Certainly black bags are a nuisance, but there's a certain part of the community that think by putting the stuff in black bags, it keeps the bin clean. And it's little things like this that we need to improve upon. But no, we aren't going to alter our targets. We're going to keep to try and achieve them, and whatever we can do to improve, we will do without any question at all.
So sorry, just get back to that then, Carl. As I say, it was 329,000 spent on recycling last year. And based on that figure, I'm just a little disappointed that we didn't get as close to the performance indicator target as we should. And I'm wondering what more do we need to do to get to the targets that we've set.
We will do whatever. any ideas are really appreciated. We'll do whatever we can. You express your displeasure. Believe me. Disappointment rather. Believe me, I'm every bit as disappointed as you are. The targets are challenging, but that is, I repeat, that isn't a reason to change the targets. We should stick at it. And if it costs slightly more, that's what we're going to have to do, unfortunately. There is a cost to climate change, and there's a cost to complying with all the implications of climate change. We have to face up to that fact.
Okay, I get 2 more points. On indicators RP 10, 11 and 12, some great results there for planning. There's through all these policy meetings, there's I would come across a bit of planning bashing, sometimes justified, sometimes not justified. But from what I gather from what Neville has told me, there's been some good stuff put into that department to get to their indicator targets. It's positive news. It's going in the right direction, which I hope will get ratified by that peer challenge review that is imminent. The only question I've got is that in the revised scheme of delegation, can we confirm that we haven't denuded the opportunity of our residents to challenge the decisions via the committee?
Good question. I'm wondering if anybody really wants to take that answer up. I think there's always a risk when you try and streamline a service that you possibly do pull the residents out of it. I don't think we have. We're to be getting the challenges still through the planning committee. I haven't seen really where somebody's turned around and said this should have gone and it hasn't gone. We've still got that ward representation. The call-in's still there. It is just a bit tight a timescale. But I think that is one of the reasons we need to do this planning review and peer review, is to make sure that these things aren't wrong and we aren't really making a mess of it. Because I think it's really important that planning has to be seen. It is statutory function, but it has to be seen to be being done correctly to the residents across Craven. So wait for the peer review and they shall tell us.
Okay, and finally, Revs and Bends. Again, it's great to see the figures. And I think, especially in the times that we're currently living in, to know that we've got a department that is fully functioning and processing stuff in a timely fashion, I think that's that's really encouraging. And I think that department, more than any at the moment, is going to be in demand. The question I have, it's not a loaded question. I just wondered, do we have indicators that where we can measure the accuracy of processing and the number of appeals that people may put against decisions that are made. I mean, I'm quite happy with the delivery. But are our residents and is there a way of measuring that?
Well, I haven't got a clue whether how we measure that. Anybody want to put a hand up somewhere after the officers, or ever to get your written response on that one?
That's fine. I don't want to hold Richard up.
If we send that round all members, I think that'd be good. So Councillor Soloway and Councillor Madeley.
Thanks, Chairman. Mark actually touched on what I was going to say, which is on Annex E, which is to do with the performance of benefits and planning services. But I never miss an opportunity to come on to Policy Committee and big up the work of Select Committee, who there was a while ago that the Select Committee had a thorough review of revenues and benefits, and I think some of the work that they fed into that also had an impact. And I do know that Select Committee are involved in a review of the planning department, and they have done in the past. So I mean, I'm going to come in on the next item because I want to know what role Select Committee may or may not have. But I just never miss an opportunity to come on Policy Committee and big up what Select Committee do.
Select Committee are awesome, Councillor Soloway, as always. Councillor Madeley.
Yes, Chairman. It's just going back to the new planning bill, which will come, and quite a few people and officers have mentioned it. But I would like to bring up that I think it's going to be difficult for the government to get this through, because the MP for the Cotswolds is not known locally as a local socialist, but he does say, he's also treasurer of the 1922 committee, if this bill passes, we will be building slums for the future. Those were his actual words on the radio. Now, I feel if somebody of his seniority from the Conservative Party is mentioning things like that, it doesn't look good for the future for local planning laws and local councillors to have any say on what is going to happen. It's just a statement, but when people look at changing regulations, you want to see the motive of it, and to me it sounds like a builder's job here. But that's my say, and I don't want anybody to come back. It's just the point I wanted to make. Thank you, Chairman.
A lovely point, Councillor Madeley. No, I think we've got to look at this. It is a white paper. It isn't a done deal.
Yeah.
We need to work through it. Do I need to move this, and then does somebody need to second it? Looking at Hannah or Guy.
I think it's been moved. I'm not sure if we've got a seconder at the moment, Councillor Foster.
You've got about 4 you can pick off the screen. I'll go for Councillor Wheeler.
I don't think we require a vote for this one. The report, the recommendation is just the noting. So I think some general consensus from the committee is absolutely fine.
Going to sort of see nodding. Yeah, I'd just like to echo, before we move on to the next time, echo Councillor Wheeler that, yeah, the Resident Events Department is fully staffed at the moment and is fully functional, and it may well be quite required as the furlough scheme ends, and unfortunately some more people require that service. So I think we're in a good place with it, and it'd be great if we keep that going. And plus they work really well doing all that extra work that was dumped on them from you know, getting the government grants out and stuff like that. So it's been hard work at the department, but it's functioning and still looking after the day job as well, which is really, really good. So with that note, we've had a nod for that. So I'll move on to agenda item 8. The Local Government Association Peer Challenge Planning Service. I appear to be the lead member for this, which I'm sort of quite happy to be. Planning's been through a bit of a challenge. I think Select Committee did a huge piece of work on it and came up with it needs work, it needs looking at. And I think we probably need to look at the department, you know, not just a case of the officers, but also members, how we do things. Is there a better way of doing planning than we're doing at Craven at the moment? It may come back that there isn't, but I'm guessing there's probably quite a few people just sat in here who members of the planning committee or whatever who think that maybe it does have a few flaws in there. So I do think, you know, checking up, as Councillor Wheeler said, making sure we are doing planning that's benefit of the public and everybody else. So I just think this is a really good idea. It doesn't really cost us particularly any money. It costs officers time, costs a few members time, but hopefully it'll be worth it. It'll come out with some recommendations that then we can get on and act on. And that goes along with the work the select committee did to you know, and their recommendations and the growth bid for extra staff in there, which is all part and parcel of this going forward. So after having said that and led on it, I'm happy to move the recommendation that we get on and do this, bearing in mind that we probably are already going to be doing this. I've Councillor Ireton, then Soloway, and then Rose at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think it's a good thing, but I would question, is it a little bit late in the day? You know, with what's going on with reorganisation of local government. Are we going to get a report on the planning department, the planning committee will be looked at? But will there be time to implement any recommendations, you know, with what's going on with the local government review? So that's just a question I pose to you, Leader.
Whatever we do from this, there will still be in some way, shape or form local planning, I think, Councillor Ireton. So if we can get a system of local planning that works with local government review, and we can put it out to whichever organisation we end up in, that this is the way to do it, then hopefully we'll be able to keep most of the good practice. Hopefully we'll carry on into any new organisation. I think that's what the words I'd use.
Yeah, I seem as though I've lost everything off my screen here. I don't know whether you can still hear me or not.
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Yeah, good. Yes, I mean to say it's all right sort of having a report back in of what's been done well and what can be improved on. And planning will have to be done locally. But it's who's going to do that planning locally, isn't it? And, you know, is it a report that we're going to get back from a peer review that is of no consequence to the new authority? That's all. It should have been done sooner, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it's timing and everything. It probably would have been done sooner had it not been coronavirus. So I'm a dog falling out with a horse. So
yeah, and I've got to try and find my screen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, hindsight, everything could have been done earlier, but it hasn't been. So we are where we are. But yeah, I think we ought to do this. I think it's a piece of work, and who knows how long our planning committee is going to be sitting making planning decisions as we go through the transition. So it'd be great if it was making really good decisions through that period, I think.
I'll support.
Seconding from Councillor Ireton, so we'll go to Councillor Soloway and then Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just, I think I alluded to what I last said. Select committee have been involved in this right from the start. In fact, there was a select committee recommendations policy committee that would put extra funding and finance into the planning department, so it came from there. And my question is, you were saying it's going to work in conjunction with it. Well, there's people on select committee who are very, very keen and would to be involved in this. And the question is, will it complement, will it go along with the select committee work, or will we just involve all members from across the council on it? I think, like a lot of people have said, that there'll always be a planning role, and if we get it right and carry on getting it right, it puts us in a much stronger position with local government reorganisation anyway. Planning is one of our real public facing departments, and it has had its problems in the past, and we really do need to get a handle on it. My question is, will it involve select committee as well?
I am guessing it will be members across the council. I'm looking at the chief exec just to come in and just say who will be involved.
Yeah, it follows the peer reviews we've had on the corporate peer reviews as well, so that all members will be involved in essence. All members will get a chance to input into this with the peer team. It is going to be quite a senior peer team who will come across, including the lead member. So I'm actually quite looking forward to seeing, is there anything we're missing? And that's always the question you pose to yourself when you undertake a peer review. We think we're doing it well, but actually, can we improve? Is there something we're missing? I think the leader phrased it very nicely at the start of this debate.
Rose? Are you there, Councillor Rose?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Yes, I do hope that this will be a positive and constructive process, and I'm sure it will be. And as Councillor Soloway alluded to, we have a pretty poor public don't think much of planning. And being on the planning committee, I'm well aware of their views, shall we say, which are made with no holding back. And yes, there's so many changes ahead. I mean, quite scary with respect to local government review, with respect to the white paper and so on. There have been challenges and there will be more to come. Hopefully, at the end of all of this, we'll be really well prepared for the changes and looking forward to it all from a positive stance, really. So I think it's an excellent thing, and I do hope, and I'm sure it will be, a good outcome. So thank you.
Councillor Rose, looking around, Councillor Welch, you've your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, whilst I accept it's a good thing for all members to be involved with the review, having personally been sat on the planning committee about 17, 18 years, chaired it for 8 years through a lot of turbulent and tormented. I would quite willingly volunteer my services towards the select committee, by all means. As I accept it's open to all members, but I will certainly put my name forward as somebody who's probably spin.
You're struggling to hear there, Councillor Welch. You went a bit muffled, but I think you were volunteering to offer your services, which will be more than welcome.
I'm not going to go through it again, Chairman, but yes, having a lot of experience over the last 18 years.
A lot more than I've had on the Craven Planning Committee, and not having a planning application heard by it in my area either. I will be keeping fairly quiet on this compared to other members who have bigger issues, I can assure you. So it won't be getting challenged awfully much by the leadership, I can assure you from my point of view. What comes out of it will be acted on, I shall say. On that note, members, are we voting on this or noting this?
I don't think we need to take a vote. It's just to note. I think the report is just that we note the intention to undertake a peer challenge rather than approve anything specifically. So again, as long as it's been moved and seconded, just sort of general consensus from the committee is sufficient.
Well, I'm happy to move it if it doesn't be moving. I think Councillor Hayton seconded it, so I think we're there with that. Looking around, members seem to be nodding and looking in agreement. Nobody shaking their head and looking angry, which is always a good sign. So we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is appointment to the Craven Spatial Planning Subcommittee. I've been told that we have to alter the recommendations here to say to reappoint all members or current members of the Spatial Planning Committee, with the exception of Councillor Barrett, who is to be replaced by Councillor Pringle. Is that correct, Guy?
Yeah, you've kind of stolen my thunder a bit there, Councillor Foster. That pretty much sums everything up for me, really. I was just going to make a very brief introduction, just to say that, of course, as members are aware, Policy Committee is the parent body of the Craven Spatial Planning Subcommittee. That's where the appointments come to, Policy Committee. The original report was just that Councillor Pringle, a nomination by the independent group that Councillor Pringle replaces Councillor Barrett, but it would seem appropriate at this juncture to confirm the membership for the entire committee for the rest of the municipal year, as you outlined. So I'm assuming that it's the same membership as last year, with that one change. I can recap on the membership, or we can assume everyone knows what that is. It is listed in the appendix.
I'm looking around for hands up to say that they're not happy. Otherwise, we'll take it as read that everybody's happy. There seems to be nodding. Do we need a vote on this, or I'm happy to move it?
Yeah, if we can move in a second, and then we could, if I could ask Hannah to take a vote, as we are approving the committee membership for the municipal year. If we could take a vote, that'd be most helpful. Thank you.
I've a mover. Is anybody second? Councillor Iton, were you seconding? Yeah, I've got Councillor Iton seconding. Over to you, Hannah, please.
Great, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Iton.
Well, he seconded it.
Yeah.
Come back.
Councillor Liss.
Maybe come back to Councillor Iton, Hannah, and go for Councillor Liss.
Yeah, Councillor Liss.
Yeah, 4.
Councillor Madeley.
4.
Councillor Morrell.
4.
Councillor Noland.
4.
Councillor Place.
4.
Councillor Rose.
4.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
4.
Councillor Soloway.
4.
Councillor Welsh.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
And Councillor Hanley.
4. Yeah, I'm unmuted now, so I confirm that I support it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know whether it's Guy tying my hands up or not, but it won't unmute for some reason. Eh?
I promise it's not me, Councillor.
Are you sure, Guy?
That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Won't mute.
Can't mute now, can't I?
No.
Anyway, items for confirmation. Item 11. Lisa, are you doing that one?
Yeah, yes, Chair, thank you. It's all items related, all matters related to items 5 and 6.
Thank you. I haven't got any other items myself, so on that note, if everybody's happy on this sultry evening, you can go and get yourself a nice cold drink, and at least you don't have to drive home. So good luck, and thank you very much, members, and good night.